Hello, students. Till now, we have learned that a young rag picker visits the garbage dump near the writer's house every morning. The writer asks him one day his name. His name is Sahib Alam, and we know the meaning of his name, that is Lord of the Universe, and which is totally opposite to Sahib's poor life. Which is opposite, the meaning of his name was quite opposite uh, to his poor conditions. So Sahib roams around with a group of boys, and all of them were barefooted. And when the writer asked them that why they did not wear footwears or chappals, they tried to hide the fact that they were so poor that they could not afford to buy the footwear. Now, I remember a story a man from Udupi once told me. As a young boy, he would go to school past an old temple where his father was a priest. He would stop briefly at the temple and pray for a pair of shoes. 30 years later, I visited his town and the temple, which was now drowned in an air of desolation. In the backyard where lived the new priest, there were red and white plastic chairs. A young boy, dressed in a grey uniform, wearing socks and shoes, arrived panting and threw his school bag on a folding bed. Looking at the boy, I remembered the prayer another boy had made to the goddess when he had finally got a pair of shoes. Let me never lose them. The goddess had granted his prayer. Young boys like the son of the priest now wore shoes, but many others like the rag pickers in my neighborhood remain shoeless. So now the writer recalls a story which was told to her by a man from Udupi. So Udupi is a town in Karnataka. Okay, so when he was a young boy, so the man from Udupi told the writer that when he was a young boy, he would walk to his school on the way he would cross a temple where his father worked as a priest, and then he would stop at the temple and pray to the goddess to bless him with a pair of shoes. So this was the story that man from Udupi told about himself to the writer. And then when the writer visited the same town and the temple after 30 years, the writer says that the place was nearly empty. Okay, and there the writer saw the new priest in the temple who lived in the backyard of the temple. Plastic chairs in red and white color were kept there, and the writer says that she saw a young boy who came running, and the young boy was wearing a gray colored school uniform, socks and shoes, and he had a school bag hung on his shoulders, and the writer saw that the young boy threw the bag on the bed and then ran away. So the writer wants to say that the financial position of the priests at the temple had improved over the last 30 years. Earlier, the priests were not financially rich, but now the priest could afford shoes for his children. Now the writer thinks about the boy who once prayed to the goddess to bless him with a pair of shoes. And after getting a pair of shoes finally, that boy prayed the goddess that he may never lose them. He may never lose the shoes that he had got. And it is said that the goddess had granted his prayer as the boy never lost his footwear, right? So this shows that the underprivileged or the poor people value anything that they get because they have been longing for it. They wait for it, and that is why they value whatever they get. Now, my acquaintance with the barefoot rag pickers leads me to Simapuri, a place on the periphery of Delhi, yet miles away from it. Metaphorically, those who live here are squatters who came from Bangladesh back in 1971. Sahib's family is among them. Simapori was then a wilderness. It still is, but it is no longer empty. In structures of mud with roofs of tin and tarpaulin, devoid of sewage, drainage or running water, live 10,000 rag pickers. So, students, the writer now describes the area where these rag picker boys live, which is Simapuri. Their place is Simapuri. The writer says that Simapuri was located on the outskirt of Delhi, yet miles away from it. The writer says that Simapuri was miles away from it because it was very different from Delhi. Though it was in Delhi, it was on the periphery of Delhi, it was on the outskirt of Delhi, yet it was very different from Delhi. Okay, now let's see how Simapuri is different, yet it is on the outskirt of Delhi. So in 1971, when these rag pickers had migrated from Bangladesh, they came from Bangladesh. The area of Simapuri had been a wilderness, means a wasteland. Okay, there was nothing. It was empty, uh, and it was full of waste. Okay, so it was a wasteland. No one lived there. Okay, so Simapuri was still a wasteland, but now it was not empty. It was not empty, as the writer says, because almost 10,000 rag pickers lived there in Simapuri, in small houses made of mud. So these are not actually called houses. We cannot call them actually houses, but we can call them structures, just some structures where people used to live, where these rag pickers used to live. So they lived in Simapuri. Almost 10,000 rag pickers lived there in Simapuri in small structures made of mud, then with roof made of thin sheets of tin or plastic material, which is called tarpaulin, as it is given here. And there was no sewage, drainage or running water facility in Simapuri. Okay, so Simapuri was an area where garbage of the city, where the entire garbage of the city was collected. And these people, these rag pickers, started living there illegally and in a very unhygienic condition. Now, they have lived here for more than 30 years without an identity, without permits, but with ration cards that get their names on voter lists and enable them to buy grain. Food is more important for survival than an identity. If at the end of the day we can feed our families and go to bed without an aching stomach, we would rather live here than in the fields that gave us no grain, say a group of women in tattered saris when I asked them why they left their beautiful land of green fields and rivers. So students, these rag pickers had been illegally living there in Simapuri for the last 30 years. And they were living there without any legal documents. They have occupied the area of Simapuri and started living in the area without any government permission or ownership. But the politicians of that area provided them with the ration cards and voter identity cards. And because of the ration cards, these people got grocery for their family, they got food for their family, and in return, they gave their votes to the politician who had helped them. So now the writer asked a group of women who were wearing torn saris, tattered means torn saris, that why did they leave their homes in Dhaka, and they replied that if at the end of the day they were able to feed their families and sleep without an aching stomach or without an empty stomach at night, if they were able to sleep well at night and could feed their, and if they were able to feed their families, they were happier to live in Simapuri than to live in Dhaka at their fields, which were ruined, which were destroyed, and gave them no food. And that is why they found it most, or that is why they preferred to live in the area of Simapuri. Now, whenever they find food, they pitch their tents that become transit homes. Children grow up in them, becoming partners in survival, and survival in Simapuri means rag picking. Through the years, it has acquired the proportions of a fine art. Garbage to them is gold. It is their daily bread, a roof over their heads, even if it is a leaking roof, but for a child, it is even more. So, students, now the writer says that these people, these rag pickers, traveled in search of food, and wherever they found food, wherever they found it, they set up temporary homes, okay, and they started living there. So their children used to grow in these temporary homes, and gradually, at a point of time, the children also used to start helping their parents, and every one of the family became partners of survival. So together they seek their means of survival, and their only means of survival in Simapuri was rag picking. Okay, it was their daily bread. It was the roof over their head. So and since these people had been doing this job of rag picking for so many years, they became trained at rag picking and did it so well. So the writer says that for the rag pickers, the garbage was as precious as gold. And these rag pickers searched the garbage dumps and got things which they again sold to get their food. If someday they find some kind of torn or damaged sheets, they bring them and use them to cover the roof of their homes. Even if it is a leaking roof, means these sheets which they used to make the roof of their homes, these did not cover them well, but still this provided them with some protection. And that is why it is said that this job of rag picking is their daily bread. A roof over their heads, even if it is a leaking roof. And for the children, the garbage dumps were so much more than just a means of survival. Okay, so students, we will stop here for now and we'll continue in the next session.